What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, and today, active shooters. Specifically, putting together an active shooter response kit. We try and come at this the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'll forego the lengthy bio that normally is a prelude to the episode. I'll just briefly mention that I was the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area to stop active shooters. I was also an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper after my combat tours. Now there's a lot of other stuff in my bio. I might put in a quick bio at the end. But I like to establish some street cred to know that I'm not just some guy on a forum or on YouTube or whatever talking about theoretical physics in the realm of this kind of stuff. I'm very much familiar with it. I guess we should first start out with philosophy. Let's first ask why. Why would you want an active shooter response kit? Well, because sadly, in America and throughout much of the world, active shooters are a thing. Perhaps we should broaden that. I'll probably use active shooters because it's what's colloquially referred to as an active shooter. But active violence, active mass casualty events, whether it's a vehicle ramming or mass stabbing, those things happen too. The gun is just a tool, and since it happens to be a very good tool at its job, it gets used both ways, for good and evil. It is not malum in se, though. It's not evil by nature. A mass casualty event is just as bad. Whether it's a vehicle-borne IED or vehicle ramming or a mass stabbing, all these things are bad. These things, the acts, are evil by nature. They go against the very law of God, to love your neighbor as yourself. And in keeping with the law of God, it is written, "You shall not stand idly by while somebody takes the life of your neighbor." Active shooters can take place anywhere. A church, a school. There was just one not that long ago, I think, at a flower shop or a plant nursery. Talk about be ready at any time. Of all the places, if you'd list the top 100 places you might think an active shooter, you probably wouldn't put plant nursery on there. If you think it's only a big city problem, it's not. I mean, Newtown, Connecticut, Columbine, these are not big cities. Also, I would encourage you to look up your own stats on this. I've done some studying on this, but please look it up for yourself. And look up how much more effective for anybody armed, including armed civilians, to stop an active shooter who are there and armed themselves versus waiting for the police to get there. The very fact that the person is already there and willing to act makes them far more effective than the best police officer that has to respond with a 15-minute response time. A lot of people can be killed in 15 minutes. Even, the best super cop, with all the best gear, with all the best training, 15 minutes away doesn't do you much good if you're right there. Or for that next 6-year-old girl who's next in line to get shot. I hate to be graphic, but this is the world that we live in. To that little girl, that police officer is irrelevant because he's too far away. If you're there, then you're not too far away. That's why I encourage you to be armed and ready. So if you decide to take on that heavy responsibility, what can we do to get a little bit more ready? Now, you'll know I'm big on EDC. I'm going to start talking about EDC and then EDC Plus, and piecing together this active shooter response kit. So let's talk about that active shooter kit. Now, this is in addition to your everyday carry. Now, without completely rehashing and getting too far down a rabbit hole, my EDC, full-size fighting handgun, 6-hour M17, 6-hour 226, a spare magazine, a tourniquet, a fixed blade knife, perhaps a very small multi-tool, and a Sharpie. A wallet and a flashlight and my phone. That'll pretty much round out the EDC most times. Obviously that changes if I'm going out intentionally into the wilderness, things like that. That's my day-to-day. Like, I just went to Winco, just went to the gym. That's a pretty normal everyday carry for me. Now I'd say a lot of people listening to this, I hope, conceal carry. Some may not. And a lot of people that conceal carry probably carry a compact or smaller gun. I'm keeping that in mind. Tailor this to you. I have my own active shooter response kit. I still keep up with that, even though I'm not the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. But I'm going to start out with what I think is going to be most applicable to most people that aren't professional gunfighters day to day. Here's where I'm going to start. A laptop or messenger bag. I don't think that a laptop or messenger bag would be out of place pretty much in any urban or suburban environment today in the Western world. I don't think anybody's going to raise any eyebrows if you have a laptop or messenger bag. And I think it's a good size to have with you. You can have it with you on your daily commute. You could have it with you in your cubicle, in your office. You could have it with you at the bus station. Right? Nobody is going to bat an eye that you have a laptop or messenger bag. They're so common to almost be ubiquitous today. Lots of people have them. Now, going back to, I generally carry a full-size fighting handgun. Many don't. I would much rather you have a Ruger LCP or a Smith & Wesson J-frame. I really like my J-frame. It was my carry when I went running yesterday. But for day-to-day, I hope you carry something a little bit bigger if you can. And again, I'd rather you have both of those things or one of those things than nothing. But if you're going to face an active shooter, is the handgun you want the Ruger LCP or the Smith & Wesson J-frame? I'm not picking on those guns. I'm just saying that's not the tool for the job. So let's build our bag around this gun here. A full-size fighting handgun. A full-size fighting handgun, and when I say full-size, I mean full-size, like a Glock 34, or lovingly referred to as the Tactical Wheaties box, and FNX 45, a Beretta 92, a full-size fighting handgun. I would have it in this bag. This is a good case for a weapon-mounted light. I am not generally a big fan. Even when I was a police officer, LAPD, and I wore openly that giant Sam Brown belt, I quickly transitioned away from carrying a light on my handgun. Just, they make your gun, your holster, your carry feel kind of pregnant, and just, I don't like them. So this is a good case for a weapon-mounted handgun light. So a full-size weapon, full capacity, with a light. And then in this laptop bag, you should have plenty of room for spare magazines. I mentioned my normal EDC full-size fighting handgun with one spare. You're probably going to be okay with one full-size fighting handgun, even without a reload, but even with one reload. But why not put in at least two? At least have a police officer's common duty loadout. Somewhere around 50 rounds. This is not a Rambo bag. This is not doing combat roles to fight the Vietnamese army. You may deal with multiple active shooters. You're probably talking a fire team or less. As much ammo as you feel comfortable, but I'd say 50 rounds for this is a good benchmark. If you want more, then throw in more. The next thing I would really have in this kit is medical. And I didn't start with medical, and here's why. As the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters, I struggled with this because we did a lot of scenario-based training, active shooter response training, obviously. That was our bread and butter. We did a lot of role play, actor, scenario-based training, and it's really hard as that caring, loving individual to not, I repeat, not stop and put a tourniquet on somebody that's screaming and yelling and bleeding out, especially with a young kid or a woman. And it really took a lot of training to bypass that. and let me break this down to you. If this is an active shooter, you have reason to believe, you can hear, you know, you have people running by screaming, this person is still shooting. And you're really efficient. You're Johnny on the spot with the tourniquet. And it takes you 30 seconds to put on that tourniquet. How many other little girls, little boys, women, old ladies got shot, got killed while you were applying that tourniquet? I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to put on a tourniquet. I'm saying it's not the best thing. Worry about problem number 1 first. Stop the threat. Even if you get to the threat and you have to exchange gunfire with him, at least those rounds are coming at you, targeted at you, and not little kids, women, whatever the case might be. Hopefully you're brave enough to be able to do that. But problem number 1 first, stop the threat. You put a tourniquet on one person and save their life, and 15 other people died in that amount of time. I don't think I would say that was the best course of action. And again, that takes guts and training. But I would put it number 2 on the list after problem number 1, stopping the active shooter. You're probably going to be at a mass casualty event. So this is going to be important, medical. Now, this laptop bag could probably hold a few tourniquets. I'd start there. If you want a complete kit, Refuge Medical is who I use, other than I'm an actual patron of Bear Independent, and I buy their kits. They make good kits. So Refuge Medical. Also, North American Rescue, they have their own kits. They have one called an IPOC. That will be a pretty good one for this kit, because you don't need a standalone pouch, right? It's going to go inside a laptop bag. I'd have a couple of tourniquets. Cat tourniquets are kind of the standard. I might have a couple of SWATs also, SWAT tourniquets, because they can also be used for other things. So that'd be a good place to look. I would also have some extra combat gauze in there. Chest seals obviously are pretty thin and flat. Maybe a couple of chest seals. And if you don't have TCCC or similar medical training, I would encourage you to go look and get it. Because you could have all the tourniquets in the world, but you put it on wrong, you don't tighten it enough, whatever the case is, you know, it's kind of like the gun. Just having it doesn't do any good if you can't drive it. You can't operate that machinery. You need training. So I'm just going to plug that in here. But having that medical kit, several tourniquets of whatever flavor you like and are familiar with. Cat is kind of the standard. Several probably chest seals, sadly. Some combat gauze, all that stuff. It may be a little bulky, but you're talking about you have a bag here, and none of that stuff is particularly heavy, especially compared to guns and ammo. On the medical, I would also have a pair of trauma shears in there, for the obvious thing that trauma shears are used for. I hope that you're EDCing a knife, so you may or may not want an extra knife in here, maybe a multi-tool. Also, I have an EDC flashlight. It's a fairly small flashlight. I would like a bigger flashlight in here. I would have a decent sized flashlight. Even if I have a weapon mounted light. The weapon mounted light does not take the place of a handheld flashlight. There are things you need a flashlight for you might not want to use your weapon mounted light for. Let's say you've taken care of that active shooter, now you have a bunch of screaming, bleeding out people. You don't want to go pointing your gun at them to patch up their wounds, right? You're going to need a good weapon, you're going to need a good light other than your weapon's light. Also for this, a headlamp might be good. A good, decent headlamp in there would make a lot of sense. Caveat, a good headlamp you might want in there anyway. That's just a good piece of kit to have. Also, you may want restraints in there. Now, you need to check your laws, but even in California when I was a peace officer there, citizens have the right to arrest. You have the right to detain. Especially for a felony committed in your presence, which is likely to be the case here. Let's say there's multiple active shooters. Let's say you shoot the guy once. Not life-threatening, but he decides, hey, I've had enough, I don't want to play this game anymore. And he surrenders to you, but you still have another active shooter. Restraints would be good in here. I don't care if they're flexi cuffs, I don't care if they're handcuffs. Probably flexi cuffs are better for this if you don't have handcuff training. Flexi cuffs, again, don't weigh very much. You might have a pair or two of flexi cuffs in here for just that purpose. Or, you know, the horrible thing they put in a lot of movies where you shoot the person and you just walk away like you just assume they're dead. Even cops, even when they shoot a person and they think that they're dead, they still handcuff them if they were a suspect, if they were committing murder. It's still, as far as I know, still SOP to handcuff that person. Do you want to, you could stand there if that's one active shooter and have your gun trained on that person for 20 more minutes while cops show up and then maybe get shot because you have your gun out when they show up. Or you could flexi-cuff that person, put the gun away, and start helping people that need help. So I think flexi-cuff restraints make a lot of sense here. Or handcuffs, again, if you're acquainted with handcuffs. Just a quick aside, my favorite of all the years I was doing law enforcement and that kind of stuff are the ASP handcuffs. I really like those. Better than the standard like Smith & Wesson Peerless. Those are okay too. But I really like the ASPs. But you might consider restraints in this bag. You're also probably going to want a decent size Sharpie. Triage. That's all I'm going to say. If you have the training to know what triage is, and you'll know why I said that. And if not, get some training. But a big Sharpie. Also, in this bag, you may want to consider some armor. You may consider an armor plate. Whether that's a straight piece of Kevlar, you can buy just straight Kevlar panels. You might want that in this bag. Makes a lot of sense. In addition to being bulletproof, it can often stiffen. If you got a bunch of this stuff in here, you could put a panel on each side, assuming the bag is set up like that, and stiffen that bag so it doesn't really look like there's a bunch of stuff in it. And Kevlar's pretty light. If you wanted to go the full, more high-tech hard armor, they do make lighter than steel. I think steel would be pretty obvious in this bag. Somebody would probably look at you if you were carrying a steel plate and think, he's not got a laptop in there. But they do make lighter, polymer, good plates. You might look at Vism. There are probably some other companies now. But good, solid armor panels might be a good idea for this. And this is not a survival bag, right? You don't need a water purifier. You don't need a bunch of that other stuff, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a prepper. I'm a survivalist. I don't want to apologize for that. I like breathing air and being able to eat food day to day, whatever situation. But this is not the place for that. This is an active shooter kit that we're talking about. So I think that would be most applicable to the broadest audience of people. Here's another way you might want to go, because even the best full-size fighting handgun, even the crew-served, jokingly called Mark 23, beast of the combat offensive handgun, you're still going to find yourself on the wrong end of that firepower equation if you're going up against an AK, an AR, or similar, which are fairly common. So here's the next thing I'm going to talk about. We use these. Sometimes we want it to be overt and let everything be known. Full kit. Sometimes we want it to be clandestine, covert, blend in. There are a couple of bags I'm going to recommend, and there may be others, but you may want a good rifle bag that doesn't look like a rifle bag. A long gun. Maybe you want a long gun for this. Maybe you're willing to do that. Maybe your active shooter response kit is going to consist of a long gun, and if you can, I think that you should. Now, there are many rifle bags that look like a rifle bag. Big whoop. There are a couple that don't look like a rifle bag. This, I think, is what we're going for here. A couple that I'm familiar with. Vanquist and London Bridge Trading Company. Both make good rifle bags that don't look like a rifle bag. And you could put a lot of stuff in there. As much as I like AKs, I don't think this is a place for an AK. For a couple of reasons. But a big one is, whether for good or bad, in this country, we, colloquially, civilians and law enforcement, and military for that matter, generally consider the AK a bad guy gun. I'm not saying that's right. In fact, I don't think it is. The weapon is neither good nor evil on its own. But that's how it's perceived. Probably don't want to be the guy holding an AK. There are many good guns in here. You could put in here a PS90, a SCAR, but for most people that's going to be an AR-15. It's America's rifle. So in this bag, you're going to want your go-to fighting rifle, or one tailor-made for active shooters. Before, I might have recommended a smaller, shorter, handier one, so you could go with a smaller, shorter, lighter, handier bag, but with the whole pistol brace fiasco, probably just go with a 16-inch, or a pinned 14.5. Good, reliable, tested, zeroed fighting rifle. I prefer LPVOs. That being said, the vast majority, I think, on the team would run red dots. There's nothing wrong with a red dot in this scenario. But I like LPVO. But either one, obviously you're going to want a good white light mounted on there, and you're going to want a good sling. I'm a big fan of 2-point slings, but for this, where you're just going to be grabbing it out of a bag, this is probably not a scenario where you're going to be rucking with the rifle or carrying the rifle long distance. If you're moving long distance, you're probably going to be running, and the gun's probably going to be in your hands. A single point sling is useful in that somebody can't grab it and shoot you with your own gun, which I consider a big plus. But whatever kind of sling you want, a simple 2-point or a 1-point. Actually, when I ran a gun like this in a bag, I just had a piece of 550 cord as a sling. Because, again, it was moving with it in the bag, and when I got close, I would be running with it in my hands. I would just use the 550 cord around my body as a simple 2-point sling so somebody couldn't grab it away from me. Or if I had to drop it and transition to a handgun, it would just hang there. This doesn't need to be a comfortable sling, it just needs to function as a sling. Because you have the bag to carry it if you're going longer distances. Okay, that said, obviously the sling and the white light, a couple of spare mags. Again, you're not running off. This is not your I'm never coming home bag to run out into the Pacific Northwest and fight the Red Dawn battles. That's not what this is for. Active shooter response kit, a couple of mags. You're talking 30 round mags. I generally prefer to run a 20 round mag in the gun cut because you can put it in a sleeker bag that doesn't need as much space. And I would rather have a 20 round in the gun than a 30 round that I have to insert into the gun, just to save time. If I have time, then I can swap it out for a 30 round mag. But I like to run the gun with a 20 round mag in it generally, and have a couple of spares. 2 spares is fine. These bags that I mentioned and probably a couple of others will also have other compartments. For this, you could also put in your full-size fighting handgun if you're not wearing it, with a holster and a belt. And all the stuff aforementioned. The tourniquets, the pressure dressing if you want one, the chest seals, the flexi cuffs, those things could go in this bag. It's going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit bulkier. That's why I started with the laptop bag. You know, if you're going into that cubicle life and you're going to be sitting in an office, nobody's going to bat their eyebrows at a laptop bag. This bag, maybe. It really depends on you. And tailor this to you. You know, if you're in construction, maybe you go with the smaller version we talked about, but you put it in a DeWalt or a Milwaukee soft case bag that would not be out of place in your environment. Throw some cement on the outside and let it dry. Throw some tar on it and let it dry so it blends in. Keep Dominion in control of it so that nobody unauthorized gets a hold of it. But if somebody sees it, right, they're not going to think twice about it because it's natural to the environment. Heck, this is not a world that I live in, but for you, maybe that's a guitar case. I don't know. But think about it as a kit. You may decide you're really not bringing it anywhere. This is going to reside in your vehicle, in which case you may consider a large duffel bag. You put some seemingly dirty socks on the outside of it so somebody just thinks it's an old gym bag. Inside, you're running your war belt. You got your war belt set up in there. You got your AR. Maybe you take the pins out so it's smaller. You set it in the bag. A couple of spare mags, your medical stuff. I'm not saying that the laptop bag, the satchel messenger bag, is best for everybody. I started there because I think for the vast majority of people that would be the easiest and more effective way to stand ready against active shooters. Whatever kit you have, more important to be trained and ready to stop active shooters. Anyway, with that, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hope you'll consider supporting the podcast. If you listen to this and you decide you're going to buy any kind of kit, hopefully you'll consider for $5 going over and signing up on Patreon. I don't take sponsors here. Any of the stuff that I recommend is because I have experience with it, not because somebody's giving it to me for free or telling me to tell you that it's good. If you value the content, if you value an honest opinion, it's supported by viewers like you. Please consider going to Patreon and becoming a patron. Patrons do get some pretty cool insider-only content. They get to chat with me and ask me questions. But I hope you'll consider it. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, your tactical tip of the day, and then your tactical verse of the day. This tactical tip, as it warms up, hopefully a lot of us are getting out and shooting and training. And for some that means bug spray, and for some that means sunscreen, and for some that means both. Now, you could just put it on your hands and rub it all over, which I can't stand. I don't like that greasy stuff on my hands. What I like to do is take a wet wipe or a paper towel, put the sunscreen and or bug spray on the rag, and wipe the rag on my neck, on my arms, on whatever, and then throw the rag away. I don't have to deal with that nasty stuff on my hands, especially if you're out of the range without running water and things like that, without soap. I just prefer to do it that way. Get the paper towel or the wet wipe, put a bunch of suntan lotion or sunscreen or whatever on there, and wipe it on your nose, on your ears, on everything else. Well, you don't get those nasty, greasy hands. Plus, unless you do it right away, you might have lead on your hands. That's probably not something you want rubbing all over your body. That lead and mercury residue from shooting. So doing it on the rag, on a clean paper towel or rag or wet wipe, pretty handy. Just a little pro tip for you there on going to the range and applying sunscreen and or bug spray. For the tactical verse of the day, mentioned it in the beginning in Leviticus 19, you'll find a couple of different translations of this. New International Version. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. New Living Translation. Do not stand idly by when your neighbor's life is threatened. I am the Lord. King James. Neither shalt thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Lord. We often have a good view as Christians of shepherds. And shepherding entails a lot. Now, I am not a shepherd. I don't play one in real life. I've never been a shepherd. But hopefully I understand a few things about shepherds. And I learned a few things from the Bedouins when I was in the Middle East about shepherds. Here's one. Shepherds are armed. Shepherds are armed. They protect the flock with weapons. Maybe not super theologically popular in Christian circles today, but they're armed. Bedouin shepherds in the Middle East have AKs. David in the Bible, shepherd. He went to slay Goliath. He told King Saul that he had been a shepherd. He had been armed and used his weapons to slay bears and lions. He was armed. Think about that. Chew on that theologically. And have a blessed day.